The Xilian Empire had been attacking human colony worlds for 3 years. Their ships descended upon peaceful settlements with brutal efficiency, crushing any resistance and enslaving entire populations. Earth's leadership watched helplessly as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Xilians viewed humanity as weak, fragmented, and easily conquered. Commander Patricia Sullivan stood in the Strategic Defense Center on Earth, watching real-time feeds of the colony on Kepler 442b, burning under Xilian orbital bombardment. Her hands trembled as she clenched them into fists. The screen showed civilian transport ships attempting to escape, only to be intercepted by Xilian hunter vessels. 300,000 people had been on that colony. Now only scattered distress signals remained. Ambassador Vincent Cole entered the briefing room, his expression grave and weary. He carried the latest casualty reports. The United Nations Security Council had made a decision after countless emergency sessions. Earth would no longer tolerate this aggression. The age of hiding behind diplomacy and hope was over. General Marcus Thompson presented the classified plan to the Council. For years, human scientists had been developing a communication system that could reach across stellar distances instantaneously. They had also been building something else in secret, a fleet that represented the full industrial might of Earth combined with technology salvaged from abandoned alien structures discovered on Mars decades ago. The ancient technology had been found by deep space miners in 2087. It had taken humanity decades to reverse engineer its principles, but the breakthrough had come just in time. Engineer Patrick Hayes and Dr. Natasha Volkova had finally cracked the code to weaponizing the alien power systems. The fleet was ready, hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Jupiter's orbit. Patricia Sullivan studied the tactical displays showing Xilian positions throughout human space. 12 invasion fleets were currently deployed across the galaxy, each one capable of leveling entire worlds. But Earth was no longer helpless. The moment of response had arrived. The transmission was prepared. Patricia Sullivan would deliver it personally. Every Xilian vessel in human space would receive the message simultaneously through the quantum communication array. The words were simple but carried the weight of a civilization's resolve. This was humanity's final warning. Patricia Sullivan sat before the broadcast array in the darkened transmission center. The hum of machinery filled the chamber as technicians made final preparations. Her voice would travel at faster than light speed to every corner of Xilian-occupied space within seconds. She took a deep breath and began to speak. She laid out the facts of human suffering with unflinching precision. Kepler 442b, obliterated with 8 million colonists. New Terra, conquered and its population enslaved. Distant Horizon burned from orbit. She cataloged every attack, every atrocity, every moment when humanity had shown restraint while the Xilians showed only cruelty and contempt. Patricia's voice remained steady as she addressed Emperor Crexin directly. For decades, the message explained, Earth had observed the Xilians from a distance. Humans had learned their tactics, studied their military protocols, understood their weaknesses. Earth had possessed the capability to respond with overwhelming force for the past 5 years, but had chosen patience and diplomatic channels instead. Those days were ending today. She revealed that human forces had achieved major victories already, destroying 3 Xilian fleets in the outer colonies without any public announcement. The element of surprise was no longer necessary. Humanity was stepping into the light as a military power, and the galaxy would soon know it. The ultimatum was delivered with absolute clarity. Cease all attacks on human worlds within 14 solar cycles. Withdraw every military vessel from human territory, and open peaceful negotiations for territorial boundaries and non-aggression pacts. Failure to comply would result in consequences the Xilian Empire could not endure. Humanity would bring the war to Xilian home space itself. The transmission concluded with a simple statement. We are the people of Earth, and we will no longer suffer your aggression in silence. Empire Commander Crexin received the message aboard his flagship, the Void Render, as he prepared for the final assault on the human capital world. His alien features contorted in what could only be interpreted as a snarl. He played the message again, his mandibles clicking with agitation. This was audacity beyond comprehension. A species that had never ventured beyond their home system until recently now threatened the mighty Xilian armada. Crexin's military advisors shifted nervously. Some suggested caution. The tone of the human transmission carried confidence that seemed misplaced for a primitive civilization, yet troubling nonetheless. But the commander would not be swayed by uncertainty. He laughed and sent immediate orders. 2 additional invasion fleets would launch toward Earth and the nearest human colonies. Humanity would learn the price of such insolence. When Zillion ships jumped to light speed toward new targets, they encountered something that would change the course of galactic history. A human fleet emerged from hidden positions throughout the solar system, blocking their escape vectors. The ships were smaller than Zillion vessels, sleek and efficient, moving with precision that suggested years of coordinated training. Lieutenant Commander Adrian Hayes led the engagement from the bridge of the UNHF Endeavour. She was a third-generation space warrior, trained from childhood for this moment. Her tactical team had studied Zillion combat patterns extensively. Every weakness had been catalogued, every predictable maneuver anticipated. The battle erupted with surprising intensity. Human drones, coordinated through quantum-encrypted networks, created attack patterns the Zillions had never encountered in their entire military history. Small teams of fighters moved with supernatural coordination, striking weak points in Zillion defensive formations. Electromagnetic pulses, engineered specifically for Zillion technology, disabled 3 capital ships simultaneously. Engineer Patrick Hayes, Adrian's cousin, monitored the performance of the alien technology weapons from a combat support station. The ancient systems were operating at 95% efficiency, better than anyone had predicted. The weapons sang through space, cutting through Zillion shields like they were made of paper. An asteroid, redirected through careful calculation by Dr. Natasha Volkova's team, collided with the Zillion destroyer before their sensors could even register the threat. 2 more enemy vessels followed as the coordinated destruction continued. Humanity's strategy was based on a simple principle. They had studied their enemy thoroughly while remaining mysterious themselves. The Zillions had never bothered to investigate human capabilities. They had simply assumed superiority based on past conquests. That arrogance would cost them dearly. When the Zillion reinforcements arrived, they were met by the same coordinated human defense. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The battle raged for 6 hours before the Zillions finally began a desperate retreat. News of the victories spread through human colonies like wildfire. For the first time, colonists felt genuine hope. Children who had grown up under the shadow of Zillion threat could now imagine a future free from fear. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every major city and settlement. But the military leadership remained focused and vigilant. General Marcus Thompson gathered his war council with Captain Elena Rodriguez, Chief Strategist Dr. Kevin Park, and Admiral Robert Jenkins. They knew the Zillions would respond to this affront with their full military might. This victory was important, but it was only the beginning. The real test was still to come. Emperor Krexen stood in his war chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the extent of his military losses. His mandibles clicked with barely contained rage. A primitive species had destroyed his carefully laid plans. 3 of his fleets had been annihilated or severely damaged. The message from Patricia Sullivan played continuously on every military frequency in his palace. We do not wish for war, but we will defend our worlds, our families, and our future with every resource at our disposal. The Zillion Emperor's advisors presented conflicting recommendations. Some suggested negotiating with these unexpectedly capable humans. Others urged caution and reassessment. But Krexen's pride would not allow retreat or discussion. He had ruled the Zillion Empire for 30 cycles through strength and dominance. He would not appear weak before his people or his enemies. The Emperor made a fateful decision that would alter the course of galactic civilization. He would commit his entire Western Armada to the complete and total annihilation of humanity. If these humans wanted to be taken seriously as warriors, they would be granted their wish. The largest military force the Zillion Empire had assembled in 500 years began its journey toward human space. Thousands of warships carrying millions of soldiers prepared for total war. Intelligence networks on Earth detected the massive mobilization immediately. Satellite systems across the solar system tracked every launch, every ship that entered the fold space tunnels heading toward human territory. The response team gathered in emergency session. This was the moment they had both feared and prepared for. But Earth scientists and military had prepared contingencies for exactly this scenario. Dr. Amelia Walsh, one of Earth's most brilliant physicists, had developed a revolutionary technology based on principles found in the ancient alien structures on Mars. The system created localized disruptions in subspace, making travel through certain regions of space dangerous or impossible for larger vessels. Smaller, agile human ships could navigate the interference using quantum compass navigation, but Zillion capital ships would find their guidance systems completely unreliable. Admiral Robert Jenkins positioned the human fleet in the Orion Passage, a critical corridor through which all approaching Xylian vessels had to travel. The subspace weapons were deployed strategically across 3,000 kilometers of space. Thousands of human fighters were stationed in hidden positions throughout the region. When the Xylian armada arrived after weeks of travel, they found something completely unexpected. Their navigation systems began failing. Their great battleships experienced temporal distortions that made precise maneuvering impossible. Sensor arrays reported data that contradicted observable reality. The commanding officers were paralyzed by confusion. Admiral Hayes sent her starfighters forward to test the Xylian response. The enemy tried to maintain formation but couldn't. Ships collided with one another. Weapon systems malfunctioned due to the subspace interference. Within minutes, 3 massive Xylian cruisers attempted emergency jumps back into fold space and vanished, presumably destroyed by the spatial disruptions. The Xylian military commanders, realizing they had sailed into a carefully constructed trap, ordered an immediate retreat. Pride and confidence turned to panic as they executed emergency maneuvers. Several more ships were lost before the remaining vessels managed to escape the Orion Passage. The supposedly invincible Xylian armada had been forced to withdraw without firing a single shot in anger. The message from Earth came again, delivered by Patricia Sullivan in person through a secured diplomatic channel. The offer remained unchanged: peace, territorial boundaries, and mutual respect. Attack again, and humanity would take the war directly to Xylian territory itself. Human forces were preparing invasion fleets of their own. The age of Xylian expansion was ending. Emperor Crexen sat alone in his throne room for the first time in days, considering the impossible situation his empire now faced. Military defeat was a foreign concept to him. The Xylian Empire had not lost a war in centuries, yet here he was, facing a foe he had dismissed as inferior just weeks before. His military advisors presented scenario after scenario, each one more horrifying than the last. If humanity possessed the capability to defend themselves this effectively with minimal preparation, what might they accomplish with a full industrial mobilization? Intelligence reports suggested that Earth had not yet deployed its full arsenal. Scientists were estimating that humanity was operating at perhaps 30 to 40% of its actual capacity. One advisor, Commander Vextall, presented a radical proposal. Perhaps it was time to consider that the age of conquest through force was ending. Civilizations that survived, changed, and adapted. The Xylian Empire could do the same. The galaxy was vast enough for multiple military powers to coexist. Crexen's first instinct was to remove the advisor's head for such talk. But something in the logic resonated. His pride demanded victory, but his intelligence demanded survival. The Emperor made the pragmatic decision. He would open formal negotiations with Patricia Sullivan and the United Nations. The first diplomatic meeting took place on a neutral station, built on ancient alien ruins orbiting a dead star. Patricia Sullivan walked into the conference chamber with confidence, flanked by Ambassador Vincent Cole and General Marcus Thompson. Across from them sat Commander Crexen and his delegation. The atmosphere was tense at first, filled with the weight of recent conflict and the blood of millions. But slowly practical discussions began. Xylian forces would withdraw completely from human space. A demilitarized zone, 200 light-years in width, would be established between Xylian and human territories. No military installations would be permitted within this buffer zone. Trade relationships would be established, slowly and carefully, between trusted partners. The negotiations lasted 3 months, with multiple diplomatic teams working through complex territorial and legal frameworks. By the end, something remarkable had happened. Mutual respect had begun to develop. The Xylians came to understand that humans were not primitive at all, but rather a species that had evolved along a different technological path. Humanity had developed strategic thinking and adaptability that surpassed Xylian military doctrine. For humanity's part, they recognized that the Xylians were not the unthinking monsters they had feared. They were a civilization with their own history, their own culture, their own reasons for expansion. Understanding did not erase the suffering of the past, but it created a foundation for future coexistence. On Earth, the celebration was muted and respectful, held in the months following the signing of the peace accord. The cost of the conflict had been high. 17,000 human soldiers had died in combat. 43 million colonists had been killed or enslaved before the military response could be mobilized. Entire worlds lay in ruins. Families mourned their losses in quiet dignity. Patricia Sullivan stood before the United Nations General Assembly in a packed auditorium. The address would be broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. She spoke carefully, measuring each word with precision honed through years of diplomatic service. She spoke of the hard-won peace, the territories reclaimed, and the price of freedom. She acknowledged the sacrifices of those who would never come home. She honored the memory of children and elders who had fallen during the invasion. Their names would be recorded in the monuments that would be built throughout human space. But Patricia also spoke of something deeper. She described the moment when humanity had looked into the face of overwhelming odds and refused to surrender. She explained how innovation, preparation, and unity had transformed a desperate situation into victory. She talked about the scientists who had cracked alien technology codes, the engineers who had built weapons from ancient ruins, the soldiers who had fought with courage beyond measure. Patricia also spoke of the future with careful optimism. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing against an empire that had seemed invincible. Now they had the responsibility to ensure that they never became conquerors themselves. The weapons that had been built to defend Earth would be maintained, but they would be instruments of deterrence, not aggression. She announced that Earth would be entering the greater galactic community with open eyes. Trade agreements were being negotiated with multiple species. Educational exchanges would begin. Human artists, philosophers, and scientists would share their culture with the galaxy. In return, humanity would learn from civilizations thousands of years older. General Marcus Thompson stood in the Defense Center weeks after Patricia's speech, reviewing intelligence reports with his staff. The Zillion Empire was beginning to consolidate its territories. Other alien species who had been considering attacks on human worlds were reconsidering their plans. The galaxy was learning that Earth's people were not to be trifled with, that their courtesy had limits, and that when their final warning had been issued, they possessed the will and the means to enforce it. Dr. Amelia Walsh published her findings on subspace manipulation technology in the greater scientific community. Human physicists received accolades for their achievements. Engineer Patrick Hayes was offered positions leading research facilities across 3 different planets. Dr. Natasha Volkova became an advisor to the United Nations Space Council. In quiet moments, Patricia Sullivan would sometimes stand alone in her office and think about the path humanity had taken. They had faced extinction and chosen to fight. They had developed weapons they had never wanted to use. They had learned to think like strategists and warriors. But most importantly, they had learned that they were not alone in the universe, and that sometimes the greatest victories came, not from destruction, but from the respect earned through strength tempered with wisdom. The age of humanity's expansion had truly begun, not through conquest or subjugation, but through the hard-earned respect of surviving against overwhelming odds. Future generations would study this period as the moment when humanity graduated from a single-world species to galactic players. The Zillion Empire would remember Earth as the day their certainty ended and their growth began. In the years to come, the Zillion Emperor would often reflect on the decisions he had made. The Empire would slowly transform from a purely militaristic society to one that valued innovation and trade. The demilitarized zone between human and Zillion space would become a thriving center of commerce and cultural exchange. Unlikely friendships would form between humans and Zillions, bonds forged in the crucible of conflict, but strengthened through peace. Earth's final warning had not been a call for war, but rather a declaration that humanity would no longer be victims. It had been a message that echoed across the galaxy. We are here, we are capable, and we will not be forgotten. That warning would define humanity's place in the cosmos for generations to come.